First story, my entitled wife cheated on me with my dad and got pregnant so she could get a job at my dad's business, and my dad claims he cheated to fulfill his widow's fire. Now my wife has the audacity to play victim when I asked for a paternity test for our kids, but my neighbor has my back. I had a SAT show birthday with a few close friends at my own house at the end of the party. After everyone left, my dad told me that he needed to confess something that was killing him inside. I said sure. He first started off saying that he did a lot of wrong to me and my wife. He hoped that I could forgive him. I was confused as to what he was talking about. I asked what he did, that he needed my forgiveness. He said to me that when I was on a business trip, he invited my wife. My wife and dad got together one day, and they ended up doing the thing that led to my wife carrying his baby. I just responded, WTF, is this a joke? He told me that he was being serious and not lying to me. I still couldn't believe what I was hearing. He kept going on and on, saying that the baby didn't survive, and I couldn't bear to hear it. So I just said stop the BS and told him to leave my house. I physically pushed him out of my house and I went directly to my bedroom. My wife wasn't at my birthday party at all, as she was hanging out with her girls. We were planning to go out for a date night later, but it's not going to happen. My wife doesn't know that my dad confessed to me about their affair. I don't know what I am going to do. I don't know how I am going to look at my wife and ask if this is true or not. After some time, I went downstairs again to check the front door, and my dad was still waiting in his car. He was just staring at his steering wheel, crying. I really wanted him to go away. Wanted to say something but couldn't, because I didn't trust myself to not do something cruel. My wife still hasn't come yet, and I'm writing this thanks P-Dad for giving me the best gift ever. I needed it. You are the best dad ever update after I wrote this. I went outside and didn't spend the night in my home the day after in the morning. I drove back to my house. I saw my dad's car and I was like, why the F is he here? I entered my house and heard loud noises coming from the living room. My heart sank deeply into the ground. My mind went to them effing each other. I caught my dad and wife together. She was crying very loudly, and my dad was saying things like, it's going to be okay. Take deep breaths. I am at fault. You didn't do anything wrong. When I saw them like that in the living room, I stared at them with the expression of WT is going on, y'all. Effing again, my wife says it's not what I think it is. And my dad adds that they weren't doing anything. They have been trying to get a hold of me to see what was up. I asked my wife why out of all people she had to call my dad, instead of her girlfriends that she was hanging out with on my birthday. And she said that it's because she wanted to get over this quickly, and that her girls had nothing to do with this. I asked my dad why he had to come here to comfort her, instead of sending someone else to check on her. He said the same, and said that he knew I would come here eventually, and that he wanted to sort this out with all of us being present together. I said to both of them, you guys could have called me TBF. They sent messages, but I didn't have the balls to face them yet, so I didn't reply to them. I also said that they are painting the wrong picture and that this isn't the way to go about this. My coolness left my body. I got pissed again. I just threw my ring onto the floor, and I walked away to the door. My wife's cries intensified, and she told me to listen. I ignored her. My dad started following me and told me to just stay while I turned around to him to tell him to not dare follow me. I stormed off to my car. I screamed my lungs out, and my neighbor noticed this, so she approached me to see if everything was okay. I said that nothing is okay and that I need someone to talk to. We went to her house, and I told everything to her. She was so angry at them for me and was ready to burn their lives with me. She suggested that I find a therapist and a lawyer and advised me to escape them for a better life and never look back. She offered to be with me once I faced them. She hugged me and I cried. I spent the rest of the day at her house coming up with a plan on how to confront them together here and there. I looked outside to see if my dad's car was still there. At some point in the day, he left. I spent last night at my neighbor's place. Not even once did my dad or wife come and knock on the door. They don't care about me at all to not check on me yet. They give a F to each other, to immediately be together while disregarding the pain and the devastation that they caused me to go through for no other effing reason. Reason other than their selfish evil desires. I wish my dad was the one there for me, lessening my pain. I wish my wife was the one holding me tightly to her heart. But they don't. Give an F about me instead. They were there for each other, effing each other emotionally. They literally forgot my existence. At this point, I was 100% sure that my P-Dad was telling the truth, After seeing them together like that, despite having a horrible family, I am grateful that I have good neighbors who are willing to go to war with me and stand up for me in my worst time, and that I once again realize how much of a blessing this is to me. I am a little more hopeful that I will be able to overcome this and that this also shall pass currently. I am still at my neighbor's place, and this week we are going to confront them. I will let you guys know how that goes. Hope for the best, expect the worst. TLDR, I caught Dad and wife together yesterday morning. We had a brief talk but got very mad. So I stormed off and vented to my neighbor, spent the night at my neighbor's place someday. This week we'll confront them. Update. I did my previous update, caught them together in my house on my profile. I went to my female neighbor's house an hour later or so. My wife kept calling me. She called me 3 times, but I ignored her on her 4th call. My neighbor told me to pick the phone up, so I answered her. She stopped crying, but she was still so distressed from her voice. She asked how I was doing and really wanted me to come back, but I said I couldn't. So she asked if she'd talk over the phone. I said yes. And then she said that she indeed was together with my dad when I was on the business trip. She said that one day he invited her over. So she went to his place. At the time, my wife was unemployed and looking for jobs. She was already stressed from not having any income and was lonely because of me being away from home frequently for long periods, and my dad lost his wife at the time, which made him lonely too. My grandfather had his own business and gave it to my dad. In his last years, he passed away too. During that time, my dad was running the business. He thought that he'd make a deal with my wife. The deal was that my dad would give my wife a position at his business in exchange for SX to fulfill his widow's fire. That's how everything happened. I really was speechless when she told me these things. I didn't know how to react. But I thanked her for telling her side of the story and said that I'll get back to her later. I hung up. We recorded the whole telephone call. My neighbor said that I should send a message to my dad, confirming my wife's side of the story. That's what I did, and asked my dad if the things that my wife said were true. He said yes. I took a screenshot of our text exchange now that the truth has come out. I feel better, but it has raised more questions, like why sleep with my dad just to get a job, and why sleep with my wife instead of an escort to get rid of your loneliness. None of their reasons excuse their evil act of betrayal and infidelity towards me. Once my dad confirmed everything, my neighbor and I went to my house and told my dad to come over. We had the talk finally. They said that this happened on a weekend, and they spent the whole weekend together, constantly having SX without any protection, and it was just on that weekend. After that, they never had an intimate connection. I asked my wife if she slept with anyone else, and she said no. Regarding our kids, I requested my dad to order 3 DNA tests for each of us to confirm any suspected paternity. My kids don't have to take a DNA test because they already did the ancestry test to learn more about our genealogy a few years ago. We didn't, but now that we are in this situation, we're going to do it too. However, my wife was annoyed that I was requesting a DNA test. She got so disappointed and told me that I don't trust her, and that I insinuated that those children aren't mine. When my wife told me to not request a DNA test, my neighbor said you have to do the DNA test, and of course he doesn't trust you anymore. And if you have nothing to hide, why are you so against the DNA test? My wife responded. Don't poke your nose into this. This is between me and my husband, my neighbor. Then said to my wife, unlike you, I don't poke my nose into other men's DACs, let alone my father-in-law's DAC. My wife couldn't say anything to that. She reluctantly agreed to take the DNA test. My dad ordered the tests in front of all of us. My dad once again told me how remorseful he was. He kept apologizing over and over again. My wife was the same. They started crying again, and I got pissed again. I told them that you guys are P and that I never expected this from both of you. I told my dad that he could have just slept with any other woman out there, but selfishly decided to sleep with my wife. I also told my wife that she's so cheap that she literally sold her body for SX, just to get a job in my dad's business, at the expense of destroying our family. I asked her if my dad's job and our family were worth it. She couldn't give an answer. She was guilty, and she told me that she should have been more patient in getting a job she liked, but she then confessed to me that she voluntarily left his business because of the guilt of what she did, in order to get the job. I asked my dad why he confessed now, and asked my wife why she kept this a secret. My dad told me that he just wanted to clear his conscience of this heavy guilt, and that he was having a hard time living his life with this big of a vile secret. My wife told me that she didn't want to ruin our relationship, and that she feared that she'd lose me. I said to my wife that had she told me immediately at the time, then our relationship could have been saved. But after a lifetime of our entire marriage built on lies, she brought this upon herself, and that her fear is now coming true. As for my dad, I told him that he is such a poss and that he will always carry this guilt because now he's going to live with the guilt of breaking our family for the rest of his life. I told both of them that at the end, they are the losers and that they will never get our family back. I told them that it was so clear how they were dying to be in each other's pants, and finally they could have each other. My neighbor said to them that you guys deserve each other and F yourselves to rot in hell. You guys are the worst monsters that I've ever seen. If you had read my comment, you'd know how my wife sent my dad an email saying it's all over. I told them both loudly and clearly that it wasn't over at the time, it's all over now. At this point, my dad couldn't bear to look at me anymore. So he just left our house and my wife had a full-blown breakdown. She was hitting herself, curling on the floor, screaming, while I just looked at her with contempt and disdain. I quietly said to myself that she deserved all of this, and this is only the beginning of her pain. And the dist, she caused. I just looked at her once her breakdown was over. I just asked her to leave, but she begged to stay, which I said she can't stay anymore and that she has to leave for a few days after an hour of begging. She just said F it and left. I don't know where she went, but I am happy and feel relieved. I don't care to know where she is. I don't want to think about her or my dad anymore. In the midst of this ugly confrontation, my neighbor recorded everything after my wife left. My neighbor sent me the recording and said how proud she was of me for standing up for myself and keeping my coolness, and that I deserve every happiness in the world, and that I am now free to get the life I always deserved. Away from these we hugged and I cried again. I am so happy that I have the best neighbor in the world, and I wish that my wife was like her instead of being a monster. So the confrontation happened, and we are now waiting for our DNA test kits. We will do the test and send it off. We'll wait a couple of weeks for the results to come, and let's see what we're going to come across. I hope a bag of a whole other lies isn't opened, but you never know. Got to be prepared for the worst. Now, the question is, are those kids mine, my father's, or someone else's? TLDR, my dad and wife had slept together. So my dad got rid of his widow's fire while my wife got a job at my late grandfather's business. We had a confrontation. We decided to do a DNA test, and we are now trying to figure out if my kids are mine, my dad's, or a stranger's. Second story, I disowned and kicked my son out of the house after he came out. Then my husband died, cursing me for abandoning our son. So I tried to reconcile with my son, but he refused me. Now I'm all alone, dying and regretting my actions. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect sympathy. I don't even expect anyone to care. But I need to say this to put it somewhere because I've bottled it up for too long. I ruined my family, and now I have to live with it for most of my life. I believed I was always right. I built myself up to be a strong, independent woman. I was the breadwinner in our household, had a successful career, and made sure my family had everything they needed. I made the rules. I called the shots, and I didn't tolerate anyone questioning me, including my own husband. I saw myself as the backbone of our family, the one who kept everything running. My husband was softer, quieter. He made less money than me, was never as ambitious. I never outright said it, but I thought he was weak. I convinced myself that he needed me, that he wouldn't be able to function without me making the big decisions, and for years that's exactly what I did. Then, my son came out as gay. He was 17, a good kid, smart, respectful, never got into trouble. I loved him, but when he told me that love twisted into something ugly, it was dinner. He had barely touched his food. His voice was shaking when he said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." Then came the words that at the time I thought shattered my world. "Mom, I'm gay." I lashed out. I called him disgusting. I told him he was ruining his life. I screamed that he was choosing to be this way, that he was throwing away everything we had built for him. He tried to argue, but I didn't care. I shut him down, and then I hit him. I struck him full force across the face. His head snapped to the side, and he stumbled back, the look in his eyes. I will never forget it. I should have stopped, but I didn't. I told him he had to leave my husband. His father was standing there the whole time. He tried to stop me. He grabbed my arm after I hit our son and told me to stop, but he was always too soft, too passive. I was the one who controlled everything in our house. I was the one who made the rules. So when I turned to him and said, "This is our decision, we can't allow this in our family," He just looked down. I knew he didn't agree with me, but I also knew he wouldn't fight me on it. And so my son packed a bag and left. I remember him standing in the doorway turning to my husband one last desperate attempt. My husband didn't look at him and then he walked out. And that was it. At the time, I felt untouchable. I thought I had done the right thing. I felt righteous, like I was protecting our family from shame and sin. I told myself he'd come crawling back begging for forgiveness, that he'd realize he was wrong and fix himself. But he never did, and I let him go. The years went by, and we never talked about our son, not once. It was like he had died, and I told myself I was fine with that. I focused on my career. I made more money, took on bigger roles, climbed higher. I surrounded myself with people who praised me for being a strong, independent woman who took no sh*t from anyone, and I thrived. But my husband, he changed. He stopped looking at me the same way. We stopped laughing. We stopped being close. He never spoke about our son, but I knew he thought about him every single day, and then years later my husband got sick cancer. It was slow, then fast, then everything all at once. I took care of him, fed him, bathed him, held his hand in the hospital. I told myself I was a good wife, but I could see it in his eyes, resentment, one night when I was helping him drink water. He stared at me with this empty, tired expression and said, "I just wish I hadn't listened to you." That was the last real conversation we had. He never asked for our son, not once, but he didn't have to. I knew he wanted to. I knew he spent his last years resenting me for what I did, for what I took from him. He died with that resentment, and I never apologized after the funeral. I sat in this big empty house waiting for my son to come back, waiting for some kind of resolution. Some moment where everything would be fixed, but nothing came. So I tried. I found his number and called, no answer. I left a voicemail, nothing. I wrote letters, not a single reply. I even told him I'd leave him everything, our house, our savings, because what was the point of keeping it? Still nothing. Then a few months ago, I had a stroke. I collapsed in this house alone, helpless, unable to move until the nurses came. Now I spend my days in bed with strangers taking care of me. They are kind, but they don't care. Not in the way family does, because don't have family anymore. And I see it now. I felt untouchable back then, so righteous. I thought I had control over everything, over my husband, over my son, over how life was supposed to go. But I didn't. I was just a bitter, narcissistic woman, drunk on my own power. And now I have nothing left. I wish my husband had fought me harder. I wish he had forced me to see reason. I wish he had stopped me before it was too late. But he didn't. He let me be who I was, and I let him suffer for it. And now here I am with no one left. I don't know if my son is happy. I don't know if he has a good life. I don't even know if he ever thinks of me at all. But I think of him every single day, and I will die. Knowing that I pushed away the only people who ever truly mattered. TLD, I physically and emotionally abused my son. When he came out as gay, then forced my husband to cut him off. I was the breadwinner, controlled everything, and thought I was untouchable. My husband resented me for it until the day he died. Now I'm old, alone, and recently had a stroke. My son refuses to acknowledge my existence, and I know I deserve it. I destroyed my family, and I have to live with that until the day I die. Comments. Comment 1. You're a effing monster. You beat your own kid, threw him out of the house, and manipulated your husband into abandoning his son. Then you sat on your high horse for decades like you did nothing wrong. Now that you're old and rotting away alone, you suddenly... you fit up to effing bad? You don't deserve forgiveness, love, or even a single ounce of pity? Die alone. Just like you deserve comments too. You didn't just make mistakes. You deliberately ruined lives. You physically assaulted your own child. Brainwashed your husband into cutting him off. And only now, when you're a pathetic, lonely old hag, you want sympathy that your son owes you nothing. And honestly, neither do we. You deserve every ounce of suffering you're feeling right now. Rot in the mess you made. Comment 3. Oh, buffing who you threw your kid out like trash and emotionally tortured your husband until his dying breath, and now because you have no one left to wipe your ARS, you want to confess like it's going to fix anything. It won't. You had years to do the right thing and chose cruelty every effing time. You're not a victim. You're the reason your own life is a pile of shit. Suffer. Third story. I mistakenly called a father's son a effing for shoveling snow very badly, not knowing his son had died 2 weeks ago. Now I have a lifelong friend. I didn't realize how long this story is until I typed it out, so... Sorry for the long read. For context, I'm a mailman who works out of the Midwest. I don't have to tell my fellow carriers in this area that the past 3 months have been rough. Not only has my city had snow for 3 weeks straight now, but Christmas package volume hasn't gone down very much. I've been working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Saturday for these 3 months, just trying to keep up with the volume. It's also been very cold, and all around I've been extremely stressed out and tired. Well, yesterday was no different, as I was told first thing in the morning that I had 2 routes I had to get done on my own, plus any extra packages when I got back. Not only that, but my praster, a bigger mail truck, had been taken on Sunday for maintenance, and I'd have to take a much smaller Met car. This means I'll have much less space for all the mail and packages, but Mets cannot drive through any amount of snow. Not joking, a light dust in on the road will result in you getting stuck. So I was already tired and very frustrated. Fast forward to halfway through my day, and I'm delivering packages to a nicer neighborhood. I see the house that I'm dropping a package that doesn't have any open spots to park on the street, except for in front of their neighbors. Fairly long driveway. It's not uncommon for U.S. carriers to block a driveway for a minute to just drop off a package, so I don't think anything of it. Well, I couldn't see the end of the driveway due to the other cars, and as I turned to park, I realized that at the end of their driveway was a pretty large pile of snow. I tried to brake and turn, but it was too late. I land right in the middle of this snow pile, completely stuck. I try in vain to get myself out, but for safety reasons, we aren't allowed to dig ourselves out. So I have to call the office to get a tow truck, which I'm told may take an hour to get there. This means I'll have to stay an extra hour to get the rest of the packages delivered. Pretty obviously, I'm absolutely livid at this point, cursing up a storm in my car. Well, down the driveway comes a man who doesn't look very happy. He throws up his arms in that WTF, "Are you doing" pose, which just makes me more mad. I get out and snap him a can. "I help you?" He snaps back at me with a "What are you doing blocking my driveway?" This is where I fed up. I'm usually very calm and polite with customers, no matter how rude they are to me. But today I just couldn't control myself, and I said, "Well, it looks like someone was too lazy to shovel the snow on their driveway into their yard and instead piled it in the street." The man gets red in the face and looks like he's going to scream at me, but takes a deep breath and says, "My son shoveled this for me without even thinking." Respond, well. Your son is a effing. I again expect him to yell at me, which in hindsight is exactly what I wanted him to do. Instead, he stumbles back like I struck him, and I see tears start to pour from his eyes. He immediately turns and half runs up the driveway, and I can see he's sobbing. I instantly feel confused and extremely guilty, because mailmen are not. There was no reason for me to speak to him that way. So pretty quickly I follow him up the driveway, where I see their cars parked on both of the back windscreens is a sticker of a boy with text on top and bottom that says, using a fake name, Rip Riley, "We'll miss you 2025 to 2025. I feel like I was slapped in the face. Their child had passed 2 weeks ago. I walk to their door in a daze and knock. Both parents answer, a mix of fury and anguish on their faces. That's when the stress and exhaustion from the past 3 months and the intense guilt I was feeling hit me like a brick wall. I dropped to my knees and began to cry, trying to tell them I was sorry. In between sobs, to my astonishment, both parents dropped next to me, wrapped me in a hug, and started to cry with me. We stayed like that for a few minutes until I got my crying under control, and I told them why I was so angry and how sorry I was. The dad put his hand on my shoulder and told me he forgave me, which brought on more tears. We introduced ourselves and talked for a bit, but eventually I had to go wait for the tow truck in my car. But as I was waiting, they both came out with winter gear and snow shovels. They were offering to dig me out, which I vehemently refused. I told them I didn't at all deserve their help, but the mother told me I cleaned up my son's messes for 16 years because I'm his mother. That doesn't stop just because he passed, which caused me to cry even more. They eventually got me out, and I exchanged phone numbers with them and told them I'd invite them over for dinner later this week. They accepted, and now my wife and I are going to cook them a veritable feast this coming Saturday. TLDR, IF ed up by getting angry at a family's son for shoveling the snow in their driveway onto the street. Not knowing he died a few days later. Top comment, Zenim, a mistake done on a stressful day pales in comparison to the immensity of your soul in being able to sympathize and share your heart with them. You are a good and kind person. Not everyone would think about the dad who went back home. Home crying, you did good in the end. That is what matters. Update 5 days later. So first things first, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who posted love and support on the original post. I apologize for not responding to any comments. I really thought I was going to get torn up in the comments. So I muted the post right after I posted it. I wasn't going to post the story in the first place. But a friend of mine told me about this sub and told me people would love to hear the story. I'll be more active on this post now. As for an actual update, the parents did have dinner with my wife and me last night, and they are absolutely wonderful people. They 40 and 42 are quite a bit older than my wife, 28, and I 27. But that didn't matter in the slightest. We had my family's famous goulash with a very nice bottle of wine they brought with them, and talked almost the whole night. At one point, I did work up the courage to tell them about the post, and they were a bit apprehensive at first. But once I read some of the wonderful comments you all had written, I did not read the absolutely disgusting comments. Some people left they felt absolutely blessed that so many were supportive of their family and our new friendship. The father did have something he wanted me to include in this update before he had his son. He was a lot like me, very quick to anger, prone to flying off the handle if he was having a bad day. When he had his son, he got a bit better, but was still an angry person overall. When his son died, he had an absolute meltdown and said some very hurtful things to family members who were trying to be supportive. Hyun's going to feel guilty about that forever and made a promise to both his wife and son that he would keep his anger under control. Well then, along comes me. His first real test of his new promise. He told me he genuinely believes that his son sent me as a real test to the promise he made him. He encourages everyone to do the same, to approach others with compassion and kindness before anger. As none of us truly know what battles everyone around us is fighting TLDR. My previous outburst of anger has led to a lifelong friendship. Some of OP's comments commenter, "This is the most beautiful update to a TUA I've ever seen on here. I'm glad that the moment of anger turned into something beautiful. I'm not a believer in fate or what have you, but if ever there was a case to be made for some things really do happen for a reason. It's this, thank you for updating. I've been thinking about that post, and it's amazing to see that you've connected like this and forged a friendship. My faith in the kindness of humanity has been restored on this one. Op, thank you so much. I'm also not a huge believer in fate, but I'm definitely having some second thoughts as well, commenter. I'm just so glad there was room for expansion, forgiveness, healing, and connection. I empathized my favorite sin with so many aspects of both sides of your original post. You and the dad. The anger of having to choke down the shade tea were being handed the weight of grief. Etc. What a light to shine on the human condition and how it can triumph. I love this for all of you, Op, thank you. This whole experience is going to remain at the forefront of my mind for the rest of my life, and I hope to continue spreading compassion everywhere I go. Commenter, this is amazing, and I'm so happy for all involved. Also, can you share the goulash recipe? Or is it a family secret, Op? Thank you. And I'm sorry to say it is a family secret. It's much too powerful to be shared with the world. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.